The alarms blared like a drunk uncle at a wedding, signaling yet another immediate threat to station integrity, which is just a fancy way of saying someone forgot to turn off the coffee maker again. Dr. Camille Voss didn't even flinch. She'd been at Anthropo Station long enough to know that the real threat was the boredom. "Another day in paradise," she muttered, pushing a tuft of hair behind her ear while squinting at the holographic display in front of her. Alien cultures were starting to talk about Earth myths more than Earth itself did. The irony wasn't lost on her, but the real question was, why now? "Camille," a voice barked from behind. It was Gregor, the station's supply officer, notorious for his belief that the cafeteria's green mush was a vegetable. "You seen the latest reports? Another planet using the legend of King Arthur as a metaphor for political reform. You'd think they could pick something less medieval." "Always with the Arthur crap," Camille smirked. "One time he pulls a sword out of a rock, and suddenly everyone thinks he's the hottest thing since sliced bread." "Sliced bread's overrated," Gregor shrugged, balancing a tray of what suspiciously looked like yesterday's surprise stew. "Anyway, the higher-ups are squawking about it. They think it might be a precursor to something big. Real big. Or maybe the universe has just run out of good ideas," Camille suggested, turning back to her blinking screen. A planet called Zyklon 4 was now using Sherlock Holmes as their emblem for intelligence. She couldn't help but snort. "Sherlock, huh? Guess they're trying to make deductive reasoning sound sophisticated." Just then, a hologram flickered to life beside her. It was Dr. Farnsworth, head of the station, and a man with the charisma of a wet sock. "Dr. Voss, we need to discuss these mythological anomalies." His voice as dry as the desert landscape none of them had seen in months. "As riveting as that sounds," Camille replied, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "Any chance this can wait until I finish this coffee?" Farnsworth's hologram twitched, a digital sneer forming on his face. "The council's breathing down our necks, Voss. They think it's a harbinger." "Harbinger of what? Overpriced merchandising," she quipped. "I mean, think of the action figures." "Just be ready in 10, he said before flicking out of existence. Gregor chuckled. "He's got a stick so far up his ass it's practically a spinal implant." Camille grinned, standing up and stretching. "Guess I better go see what all the fuss is about. You know, just in case it's an apocalypse we can sleep through." The corridors of Anthropo Station were as inviting as a dentist's waiting room. Bright lights, sterile surfaces, and the faint whiff of recycled air. Camille passed by the artistic attempts of her colleagues, abstract paintings that looked like they'd lost a fight with gravity, and made her way to the conference room. Upon entering, she was greeted by a circle of expectant faces. Well, expectant was a stretch, more like tired and mildly curious. The room was occupied by the station's think tank, a grand title for a bunch of scientists who'd rather be anywhere else. "Let's cut to the chase," Camille began, leaning against the nearest chair. "Why the sudden interest in our dusty old myths, Doctor?" Patel, who always looked like he was in a perpetual state of confusion, spoke up. "It seems these alien cultures are rallying around our stories, almost as if they are being used as banners for revolution." Camille raised an eyebrow. "A revolution based on myths, that's one way to outsource your ideas." "It's not just that," Patel insisted. "They're adopting our mythos as political symbols. It's creating unity, at least temporarily, as if they are drawing power from our stories." "Great," Camille said dryly. "We're the universe's new bedtime stories." Farnsworth looked impatient. "This is serious, Voss. If these myths are sparking movements, it could destabilize entire systems. The potential for chaos is chaotic," Camille offered, smiling thinly. "Let's not get too technical." A short, stocky scientist named Dr. Lee cleared his throat. "Perhaps there's a deeper connection, some underlying psychic link." Camille waved him off. "Or maybe they just find dragons and wizards entertaining. Who doesn't love a bit of escapism?" The room fell into a contemplative silence, broken only by the hum of the station's life support systems. It was a comforting sound, like a ticking clock in a room full of insomniacs. Finally, Farnsworth spoke again. "We're tasked with monitoring these anomalies closely. Our findings could be pivotal." "Pivotal to whom?" Camille asked. "The folks who fund our coffee machine or the galactic overlords we pissed off last year?" "Both," Farnsworth answered, stone-faced. "And keep the sarcasm in check, Camille. This isn't just about us. This is about the future of human legacy in the galaxy." She sighed, the weight of it all settling like a too-heavy blanket. "Fine. But if we're going down, I'm going to need more than just bad coffee and recycled air." As the meeting adjourned, Camille lingered behind, staring at the holographic display of Earth's myths spinning lazily in the air. She couldn't shake the feeling that something big was on the horizon, something that might make King Arthur look like a footnote. Gregor caught up with her as she left the room. "So, what's the next step?" "The usual," she shrugged. "We dig, we analyze, we pretend like we're not terrified of what we might find." He laughed. "And if the universe decides to stage a revolt over bedtime stories, then I'll hope they have popcorn," she said, heading down the corridor. "Because we're going to need a lot of it." The alarm blared again, a familiar, unwelcome symphony in Camille's ears. As usual, it was the universal signal for breakfast on Anthropo Station. Burnt toast. She sighed and glanced at her assistant, Ryden Care, who was frowning at his console like it had just called his mother a bad name. Ryden was brilliant, skeptical of almost everything, and right now looked like he was about to go into intellectual labor. "You look constipated," Camille said, taking a sip of what passed for coffee. "Something blocking the flow." Ryden glanced up, half-smile playing on his lips. "You ever get the feeling you're onto something big, but you can't tell if it's a career-defining discovery or an elaborate prank?" "Every Monday," she replied, leaning against the console. "So, what's got your brain all tangled up?" He gestured to the screen with a dramatic flourish, revealing a digital web of encrypted messages that looked like a toddler's first attempt at finger painting. Lines crisscrossed, forming nonsensical patterns that only a tech-savvy savant like Ryden could love. "Messages," he said, tapping the screen with a bony finger. "Encrypted and intertwined with human mythology. They're being sent to Zaltrax." "Zaltrax," Camille mused. "That's the planet where they think wearing socks with sandals is a fashion statement, right?" "Yes, and apparently they're also taking a liking to Earth myths," Ryden said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Using our stories to fuel uprisings." "Human myths?" Camille raised an eyebrow. "What, are they revolting against bad fashion sense?" "Revolting against their regime," Ryden corrected, "using our myths as symbols. King Arthur, Robin Hood, even Greek gods. It's like they're picking themes from a sci-fi Renaissance fair." Camille's smile widened into a grin. "I love it. Maybe they'll go full LARP next and start dueling with inflatable swords." Ryden chuckled, but his expression quickly sobered. "The messages are encrypted, so somebody, or something, doesn't want us to know who's behind it. And Earth's authorities think it's just a coincidence." "Coincidence," Camille repeated, rolling the word around like a sigh or candy. "Yeah, because stellar civilizations often synchronize their bedtime stories. Next they'll blame it on sunspots. Earth wants us to dismiss it, close up shop, move on," Ryden said, shaking his head. "Pretend it's all just cosmic chance." Camille leaned back, crossing her arms. "Earth's about as receptive to new ideas as a brick wall, especially when it comes to things that don't involve another tax hike." "Or a focus group," Ryden added. They shared a look, an understanding that while their discovery was intriguing, the powers that be would rather shove it under a rug, preferably one large enough to cover the whole of Anthropo Station. "Guess we're the rug sweepers now," Camille sighed. "Let's decrypt these messages, see if we can't figure out who's stirring up the mythical pot." Ryden nodded, his fingers dancing over the keyboard with the fervor of someone typing out their life story in a single sitting. Camille watched over his shoulder, half expecting the screen to reveal a message reading, "Just kidding." Instead, they were met with more lines, more codes, a digital maze designed to confuse and frustrate. But Ryden was nothing if not persistent, and Camille had long since learned to let him do his thing. mostly because she didn't have the patience to pretend she knew what half those symbols meant. "You ever think about how weird it is?" Raiden said suddenly, breaking the silence. "How weird what is?" Camille asked, drumming her fingers on the console. "That Earth stories, the ones we made up to entertain ourselves, are now causing revolutions light years away." "Honestly," Camille said, "I try not to think about it. Gives me a headache. Besides, the universe has a sense of humor, and it's a twisted one." Raiden nodded thoughtfully, as if he had just received sage advice from the universe's grumpiest guru. "Yeah, I suppose it does." Their attention was diverted by a familiar face flickering to life on the holographic communicator. Dr. Farnsworth, looking as though he'd rather be anywhere but on their screens, frowned at them. "Voss," Farnsworth said, his voice flat and unenthused. "Care. Any progress on those encrypted messages?" "We're on it, boss," Camille replied, managing to keep the sarcasm to a minimum. "Raiden's just about to crack open the universe's best-kept secret." "See that you do," Farnsworth said, clearly unimpressed with her attempts at levity. "And remember, Earth's council wants this downplayed. We're to dismiss it as coincidence." "Coincidence," Camille echoed, a grin creeping into her voice. "Got it. Right after we finish our conspiracy theory podcast." Farnsworth's expression didn't even twitch. "Just make sure you're ready for the briefing later, and Voss, try not to antagonize the council." "No promises," Camille said as his image flickered out. Raiden snorted. "As if you could hold back." "Where's the fun in that?" Camille grinned. "Besides, the council needs a little antagonizing. Keeps them from turning into full-blown bureaucratic zombies." They turned back to the console, where Raiden's progress was starting to bear fruit. Slowly, the encrypted messages began to unravel like a poorly knitted sweater. Camille leaned in, trying to make sense of the lines and symbols dancing across the screen. "Here we go," Raiden said, tapping a final command. Decoding complete. The screen filled with text, and as they read, Camille felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. The messages were indeed about Earth myths, specifically how they were being used to inspire uprisings on Zaltrax. But there was something else, a hint of something darker lurking in the background. "It's not just random," Raiden said, his eyes wide. "These messages are coordinated. Someone's orchestrating this, using our myths as a playbook for rebellion. Whoever it is, they've got a real flair for the dramatic," Camille said, shaking her head. "Just when you thought politics couldn't get any weirder." "We need to bring this to Farnsworth," Raiden said, his voice tinged with urgency. "And the council?" Camille asked, knowing the answer before she asked the question. Raiden's expression was grim. "They won't like it. They'll want to sweep it under the rug." "Well, let's make sure it's a very bumpy rug then," Camille said. They prepared their findings, summarizing the decoded messages in a neat, digestible package, something even the most obtuse council member could pretend to understand. As they worked, Camille couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something significant. Something that could change how humanity was perceived in the universe. "Ready?" Raiden asked, as they headed toward the briefing room. "Ready as I'll ever be," Camille replied, steeling herself for the inevitable clash with Earth's finest minds in denial. The briefing room was a sea of tired faces, some familiar, others new, though all shared a universal look of quiet desperation, a hallmark of prolonged space service. Farnsworth stood at the head of the table, flanked by a holographic display showing Earth's council members, their expressions set in stone. "Dr. Voss, Mr. Care," Farnsworth greeted them with the enthusiasm of a slug. "Let's hear what you've uncovered." Raiden launched into the details, explaining the encrypted messages and their implications with all the zeal of a man who knew he was about to be shot down. Camille watched the council's faces, noting the slight twitch of an eyebrow here, a twitch of a lip there, small signs that their brains were actually processing the information. "We believe someone is using Earth's myths to incite rebellion on Zaltrax," Raiden concluded. "This isn't a coincidence. It's a coordinated effort. We must caution against jumping to conclusions," one council member said, his voice oily and dismissive. Correlation does not imply causation. Camille bit back a sharp retort, her patience wearing thin. With respect, sir, when multiple alien cultures start quoting Shakespeare, it's not just happenstance. Someone's pulling the strings. There's no concrete evidence to suggest this, another council member said, her tone bordering on patronizing. These messages could be misinterpreted. Misinterpreted, Camille echoed incredulously. They're practically asking for a revolution pamphlet. Farnsworth, observing the back and forth, cleared his throat. We need to consider the implications carefully. These findings must remain confidential until we can verify their validity. Confidential, Camille repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Of course. Wouldn't want the galaxy to think we're more than just a collection of bedtime stories. The meeting dragged on, with the council continuing to express skepticism, despite Ryden's logical breakdown. Camille found herself increasingly frustrated, the kind of frustration that came from knowing you had the truth but were being asked to deny it. As they finally wrapped up, Camille and Ryden shared a look, one of mutual understanding and shared exasperation. It was clear that, for now, their hands were tied. Guess we're on standby, Ryden said as they left the room, his voice tinged with resignation. Camille nodded, her mind already spinning with possibilities, plans, and the annoying buzz of uncertainty. For now, but if this thing blows up, we're going to be right in the middle of it. And if it doesn't? Ryden asked. Camille grinned, the kind of grin that suggested she knew a secret no one else did. Then we'll make sure it does. After all, what's the universe without a little chaos? Camille stood in the dimly lit corridor of Anthropo Station, eyeing the streaming green lines of data on her handheld console like they were plotting her demise. A typical day, really. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, ear-piercing wail, a familiar alarm that made the station's walls vibrate with what could only be described as malicious glee. The universal signal that breakfast was ruined yet again. Ah, there it is, Camille said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. My favorite sound, the sweet symphony of impending doom. Ryden appeared at her side, punctual as a tax collector. If this is about the toast again, I swear I'm going to find the toaster and send it out the nearest airlock. Now that's just a waste of a perfectly good malfunctioning appliance, Camille replied with a grin. We could sell it as modern art. They made their way towards the control room, stepping over a maintenance droid that had given up mid-cleaning. Its lights flickered in Morse code that probably translated to I quit. As they entered the room, a hulking figure with a distinctive purple hue occupied the center, looking every bit like he'd stepped out of a manual on how to appear regal and mildly annoyed. Tyrell, the Zaltraxian diplomat, was as out of place on the station as a cat at a dog show. Dr. Voss, Mr. Care, Tyrell intoned, his voice a deep rumble that suggested he could either start a war or lull someone to sleep. I trust you have made progress with the messages. Tyrell's eyes, which were somewhere between a lizard's and an over-caffeinated librarian's, darted between them. He was one of the few who seemed genuinely concerned about the whole Mythas Revolution manual situation. Apparently, even among aliens, starting a riot was a frowned-upon hobby. We're working on it, Camille said, trying to ignore the fact that she was addressing someone who could probably bench press a shuttle. We've decrypted a fair bit, but finding the source is like trying to find a decent sandwich on this station. With respect, Doctor. Voss, Tyrell said, his patience thinner than the station's excuse for coffee, the situation is escalating. Myths are being warped into justifications for violence. Sounds like Earth on a Saturday, Ryden quipped. But in all seriousness, we're on it. Tyrell nodded solemnly, the kind of nod that said he understood but was still going to tell his superiors they were all doomed. Besides, Camille added, if this thing hits the fan, at least we'll have the satisfaction of knowing we were right all along. The station lights flickered ominously, adding an unplanned exclamation point to her statement. Camille and Ryden exchanged a glance. It seemed the station itself was joining in on the theatricality. Speaking of things hitting fans, Raiden said, gesturing to the control panel, we've been having some anomalies. Systems are glitching, sensors are acting like they are on a bender. Great, Camille muttered, tapping at her console with the enthusiasm of someone playing Russian roulette. Because we really needed more mystery in our lives. Could it be linked to the encrypted messages? Tyrell asked, his expression one of genuine concern, a rare commodity in space politics. Camille shrugged. Could be, or it could be a cosmic reminder that the universe loves irony. Raiden was already typing furiously, trying to pin down the cause of the anomalies. His fingers flew over the keyboard with the precision of a surgeon, or a gamer facing a particularly nasty boss battle. Looks like external interference, he said, eyes narrowing at the data. Something's poking at our systems, but I can't pinpoint it yet. Tyrell's gaze shifted, a contemplative look crossing his face. If the myths are indeed being used to inspire violence, perhaps someone is trying to keep us in the dark. Well, they're doing a bang-up job, Camille said, rubbing her temples. We're practically swimming in the dark here. The intercom crackled to life, and Dr. Farnsworth's voice dripped from the speakers like cold gravy. Voss, care, report to my office, and bring Mr. Tyrell with you. Sounds like we're getting called to the principal's office, Raiden said as they headed out. Better than getting detention, Camille replied. Though I wouldn't mind a few people spending time in a corner. Tyrell followed them, his presence a constant reminder that not everyone on the station was as blasé about potential chaos as Camille and Raiden were. As they entered Farnsworth's office, the head of the station looked up, his face set in a mask of bureaucratic indifference. Thank you for joining us, Farnsworth said, as if they had a choice. We've received reports of unusual power fluctuations and data anomalies. It's imperative we determine the cause. Camille cut to the chase. We think it's connected to the encrypted messages. Somebody doesn't want us poking around. Farnsworth raised an eyebrow, the most animation his face had shown in weeks. You believe these messages are deliberate sabotage? Believe is a strong word, Raiden said, but it's looking more and more likely. Tyrell leaned forward, his massive frame casting a shadow over the desk. This could be an attempt to destabilize alliances using the myths as a catalyst. It's crucial we uncover who's behind it. And fast, Camille added, before we become the unwitting stars of a cosmic tragedy. The station shuddered, a mechanical groan echoing through the corridors. Camille had the distinct impression that if Anthropo Station had a personality, it would be the kind to whisper, "I told you so," at inconvenient moments. Farnsworth's expression remained impassive, but there was a hint of unease in his voice. Then I suggest you expedite your efforts. We cannot afford to be compromised. Expedite, Camille echoed, a smirk playing at her lips. Right. We'll just sprinkle some magic dust and solve the mystery by lunch. Raiden chuckled. Assuming lunch isn't burnt toast again. Camille liked that Raiden could still find humor in the absurdity of it all. As they left Farnsworth's office, Tyrell lingered for a moment, his gaze following them with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Dr. Voss, Mr. Care, Tyrell said, his tone earnest. Your assistance in this matter is greatly appreciated. The stability of our relations could hinge on your findings. Camille nodded, her expression softening slightly. We'll figure it out, Tyrell. After all, we're not just here to admire the view. The three of them returned to the control room, where the blinking consoles seemed to challenge them with every flash of light. Raiden immersed himself in the data, his focus unwavering as he attempted to untangle the web of interference plaguing their systems. Camille paced, her mind racing through the possibilities. She had a knack for seeing patterns, but this one was proving particularly elusive. It was like trying to catch smoke with a sieve. Eventually, Raiden looked up, his eyes alight with that familiar spark of discovery. I think I've found something. Well, don't keep us in suspense, Camille said, leaning over his shoulder. It's a network, Raiden explained, pointing at the screen. A series of signals bouncing off satellites. It's subtle, but it's there. So someone's piggybacking on existing infrastructure. Camille mused, her mind piecing together the implications. Smart, if a little cliché. More than smart, Ryden corrected. It's surgical. Whoever's doing this knows their way around our systems. Chiral listened, his expression thoughtful. If this is orchestrated, then we must find a way to counteract it. Camille considered their options, none of which were particularly appealing. We need to isolate the source, maybe set a trap, but that requires bait. And volunteers, Ryden added, the corner of his mouth twitching into a half-smile. Guess we're it. No one else I'd rather have by my side in a fight with intergalactic saboteurs, Camille said. Besides, think of the stories we'll have if we survive. If, Chiral inquired, his voice tinged with dry humor. Camille shrugged. Got to leave room for the unexpected. Keeps the universe on its toes. Ryden tapped a few final commands into the console, setting their plan into motion. They would lure the saboteurs out, force them into making a move that would reveal their hand. It was a risky gambit, but then again, that was just another day at Anthropo Station. As they prepared, Camille couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something monumental. Intergalactic myths driving rebellions, mysterious anomalies threatening station integrity. It was the kind of chaos that made life interesting, if a touch hazardous. But as Ryden had pointed out, they weren't in this alone. With Chiral's support and their own tenacity, they might just unravel the mystery before it unraveled them. Ready for some excitement? Camille asked, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of mischief and determination. Ryden grinned back, his fingers poised over the controls. Born ready. Chiral nodded, his expression one of resolute confidence. Then let us proceed. And with that, they moved forward, prepared to face whatever cosmic joke the universe had in store for them next. The alarms blared once again, which on Anthropo Station was as close to a wake-up call as you could get. Camille, already nursing her third cup of the station's finest excuse for coffee, didn't even flinch. The alarms were like the universe's way of reminding her she was still alive, and there was still no decent breakfast in sight. Seems like we're the universe's favorite joke, Ryden said, strolling into the control room with a vigor that suggested he might have actually gotten sleep, or more likely, found a way to siphon extra caffeine from the station's meager reserves. We're definitely the punchline, Camille replied, staring at the flickering console like it was an unfaithful lover. Any more good news? Depends on your definition of good, Ryden said, gesturing to the data streaming across his handheld console. The anomalies are getting worse. Looks like someone actually wants this place to fall apart. Just when we were getting attached, Camille sighed. Let me guess, the Zaltraxians are throwing a fit. Fit would be an understatement, Ryden said, as he settled at his station. They're demanding answers, or at least someone to blame, preferably someone not them. Figures, Camille muttered. Why take responsibility when you can pass the buck? Chiral entered, his regal demeanor somewhat undermined by the slight tilt of his head that suggested even he was having a bad day. Doctor, was, mister. Care, he said with the kind of gravitas that would make a black hole feel inadequate. Our leaders are deeply concerned. They wish to speak with you. Bet they do, Camille said. Just remember, I'm allergic to public executions. Ryden snorted. Add that to the list of station policies we're not adhering to. Chiral's expression was one of professional discomfort, a look Camille had seen on many diplomats who suddenly realized they were standing knee-deep in the metaphorical manure pile of intergalactic politics. Your sarcasm, while appreciated at times, may not be well received. Story of my life, Camille said. All right, let's go charm some reptilian overlords. The trio made their way to the comms room where holographic representations of the Zaltraxian Council awaited. There they stood, looking every bit like they were carved from the very rock that made up their home planet. Camille always thought they looked like someone had decided lizard statues would make perfect leaders. She wasn't far off. Doctor, was, mister. Care, one of the holograms hissed, his tone as smooth as gravel. Explain these disturbances. Camille stepped forward. We believe someone's tampering with our systems, using the encrypted messages as cover. It's interfering with our operations and frankly making life a little too exciting. Another hologram, this one with eyes that seemed to bulge unnervingly, spoke up. These disturbances coincide with the rise of rebel factions on Zaltrax. This cannot be coincidence. Trust me, they teach us to spot coincidence versus cock-up in science school, Raiden said, running a hand through his hair. This is the latter, someone screwing with us. The council shared a look, which on a Zaltraxian face involved a lot of blinking and a sort of unnerving head tilt. Camille was pretty sure that was the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. You must resolve this swiftly, the chief hologram said, a note of threat underlying his words. Should this affect our alliance negatively, there will be consequences. Love a good consequence, Camille said dryly. Nothing motivates like fear of incineration. The holograms flickered out, leaving the room in an awkward silence, the kind that could only be achieved when you're essentially told your survival is conditional on fixing a mess you didn't make. Guess that went well, Raiden said, not even trying to hide his grin. Yep, I feel thoroughly motivated, Camille replied. Let's find out who's behind this before they decide space is better off without us. Back in the control room, the station systems continued their glitchy symphony, a cacophony of erratic beeps and flashing lights that could drive anyone to madness, or another cup of coffee. You got any bright ideas? Raiden asked, fiddling with the console as though it might suddenly cough up answers if he pressed the right button. Camille leaned against the wall, her mind working through the chaos. We need to outthink whoever's behind this. They're using our own tech against us, so we've got to get creative. Creative like Picasso or creative like I'm about to blow something up? Raiden asked, one eyebrow quirked in anticipation. Let's aim for somewhere in between, Camille said. We've got to make their trick backfire. Use their own methods to catch them out. An irony trap, Raiden said, grinning. Love it, but how? Camille pulled up a schematic of the station on her handheld console. We can use the station's internal sensors to create false data, feed it back into the network they are using. Maybe we can lure them out into the open. Set a digital ambush, Raiden said, nodding along. Risky, but it might just work. Tyrell watched them with the kind of curiosity usually reserved for creatures deciding if something is worth eating. Your idea is unconventional, he said, his tone neutral. But if it has a chance of working, I will support it. Camille shot Tyrell a grateful look. Unconventional is our middle name. Right after lucky to be alive. They spent the next few hours rigging the station systems to send out signals that would look like juicy targets to whoever was meddling. It was the technological equivalent of laying out a trail of breadcrumbs made of shiny things. Here's hoping they're as greedy as they are clever, Raiden said, finishing the last of the program adjustments. If they are not, we'll have to think of something else, Camille said, though she hoped they wouldn't have to dip into the bag of desperate measures just yet. Let's see if they bite. The station's lights flickered in what Camille had come to interpret as its version of crossing fingers. She couldn't shake the feeling that the place was just as invested in surviving as they were. As they monitored the system, Camille couldn't help but think about the myths being used to spark rebellion. It was a cruel irony that the stories humans once used to entertain themselves were now being twisted into tools of unrest. Think they'll ever make a myth about us? Raiden asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Camille smirked. I hope they leave out the part about the coffee. No hero's tale needs that kind of horror. Just then, Raiden's console beeped with the urgency of a toddler who's just discovered the dog food tastes good. We've got movement, he said, his eyes scanning the readouts. Someone's taking the bait. Time to see who likes shiny things, Camille replied, leaning forward to watch the dance of data on the screen. The console displayed a flurry of activity. Whoever was behind the interference was clearly interested in the new signals, and they were making a move. Track it, Camille instructed. Let's find out where they're hiding. Raiden's fingers flew over the keyboard, the clicks a rapid-fire testament to determination. Camille watched as the data began to coalesce into something coherent, like a puzzle finally starting to take shape. "I think I've got a lead," Ryden said, excitement creeping into his voice. "Spill it," Camille said, unable to hide her own anticipation. "It's bouncing off an old satellite network," Ryden explained. "One that was supposed to be decommissioned ages ago. They're hiding in the noise." Camille nodded. "Then it's time to make some noise of our own." "Can we disrupt their signal without crashing the entire station?" Ryden considered it, his mind working through the technical possibilities. "Yeah, we can isolate the frequency. Should rattle them enough to flush them out." "Do it," Camille said. "Let's see who's been playing puppet master." Tyrell watched them with a mixture of skepticism and what might have been admiration. "You humans have a peculiar way of making impossible things possible. We call it making it up as we go along," Camille said with a grin. "Now let's see if it pays off." As Ryden initiated the disruption, the station hummed with a new energy. It was as if the place had decided to join in the fight, lending its own brand of chaos to the mix. "Here goes nothing," Ryden said, hitting the final command. The effect was immediate. The station's lights dimmed, then flared back to life as though blinking in surprise. The console erupted with alerts, but nestled within the chaos was the data they needed. "There," Ryden pointed to the screen, where a signal had popped up, isolated from the rest. "That's got to be them. Let's make them regret waking up this morning," Camille said, her own anticipation building. With the signal pinpointed, they could finally track the source back to its origin, revealing the puppet master's location. It was a relief tempered by the realization that they still didn't know who or what they were dealing with. "Think they'll be happy to see us?" Ryden asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Happy, no," Camille replied. "But they might be surprised." Tyrell, his expression more serious than usual, added, "If this succeeds, it will prove the strength of our alliance. If not—" Yeah, Camille interrupted. "If not, we're toast. But hey, at least we'll go down swinging." With Tyrell's support and their own determination, they prepared to face whatever or whoever was behind the curtain. It was a dangerous game, but on Anthropo Station, danger was just another way to pass the time. As they readied themselves, Camille couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. From mysterious myths to potential sabotage, they dealt with more than their fair share of cosmic jokes. But they were still here, still fighting, still refusing to be the punchline. And if the universe had a problem with that, well, it would just have to get in line. The station's alarms blared like a symphony of angry cats, screeching through the corridors of Anthropo Station. Camille slammed her fist on the console, half wishing it would deactivate the cacophony, though she knew better. The station was under assault, and no amount of wishful thinking would change that. "Perfect, just bloody perfect," Camille muttered, reaching for her now-cold cup of coffee. "I needed a soundtrack to my failures." Ryden, who looked as if he was running on pure adrenaline and caffeine, glanced up from his console. "Looks like the Zaltraxians took our bait. And by took I mean they bit off more than they could chew and are now attempting to choke us with it." Camille frowned, her humor wearing thin under the stress. "You mean they are attacking us because they think we're the brains behind their rebellion's inspiration? That's the long and short of it," Ryden replied, peering at the display. "They're quoting Earth myths like a lit major on speed. Apparently, Thor and Loki have teamed up to lay waste to Anthropo Station." "Fantastic," Camille grumbled. "Next, they'll be sending us a Minotaur to maul us in the cargo bay." The lights flickered ominously, as if considering the possibility. Camille shot a glance at Tyrell, who was busy looking like someone who just realized he was at the wrong party. "We need to figure out how to stop them from turning us into mythological martyrs," Tyrell said, his voice carrying a regal undertone of panic. "Because dying heroically is so overrated," Ryden quipped, fingers dancing over the console as if sheer willpower might make it sprout solutions. "I'm more of a live cowardly and drink coffee type myself." They were outmatched and isolated, surrounded by Zaltraxian rebels who were high on the intoxicating brew of Earth legends twisted to fit their narrative. It was like being attacked by a bunch of ancient history majors with laser guns. Camille leaned over Ryden's console, watching the data scroll past. "How many ships are we dealing with?" "Too many to invite over for tea," Ryden said. "Looks like they're using at least 3 of those old decommissioned frigates. You know, the kind they used to say were too obsolete to fly. Guess someone forgot to tell them that." "Just what we needed," Camille said, shaking her head. Ghost ships with ghost stores at the helm. The station shuddered as if agreeing with her assessment, the bulkheads groaning under the strain of the assault. Camille felt a surge of frustration mixed with helplessness. They had to fight back, but their resources were limited, and their options were dwindling faster than Ryden's patience with his console. "Any suggestions for not dying horribly?" Camille asked, clutching her coffee like it was a life vest in a sea of chaos. "We could try diplomacy. Maybe offer them a cup of coffee and a history book to correct their misconceptions," Ryden suggested, a grin tugging at his lips despite the dire situation. "Or we could see if we can turn their myths against them," Tyrrell said, a thoughtful expression on his face. Camille raised an eyebrow. "Like telling them their version of Thor is actually a librarian who hates loud noises," Tyrrell nodded. "If we can disrupt their communications, plant some countermyths, we might be able to stall them long enough to figure out a real plan." Ryden tapped his console. "I can try to hack their comms. It's risky, though. If they catch on, they might just decide to skip the myths and vaporize us out of spite." "Risky is all we've got left," Camille said, setting her jaw. "Do it." As Ryden worked his magic, Camille couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of their situation. Here they were, trying to outwit a band of alien rebels who'd taken their bedtime stories a little too seriously. It was either laugh or cry, and Camille could feel laughter bubbling up despite everything. They waited, the seconds stretching into eternities as Ryden hacked his way into the Zaltraxian comms network. Camille could hear the distant rumble of impacts against the station's hull, each one a reminder of how close they were to being reduced to space debris. "There," Ryden said finally, tapping a command. "Should be in. Let's see if we can convince them their mythical heroes have decided to turn on them." Camille had to admit, the plan was insane. But then, so was everything else about their current predicament. "Now we just sit back and see if the universe has a sense of humor," Camille said, crossing her fingers more out of habit than hope. As the minutes ticked by, the station's alarms continued to drone, a chorus of doom that was becoming annoyingly familiar. Camille glanced at Tyrrell, who was watching the chaos with a mixture of disbelief and determination. "You really think this'll work?" Tyrrell asked, his voice carrying a whisper of doubt. Camille shrugged. "I think it has a better chance than handing out pamphlets on intergalactic peace, that's for sure." Suddenly, the console beeped, a sound so innocuous it felt out of place amidst the chaos. Ryden's eyes widened as he scanned the incoming data. "It's working. They're slowing down, trying to sort through the misinformation." Camille allowed herself a brief smile. "Looks like they are as confused as a Zaltraxian in a philosophy class." Tyrrell chuckled softly, the tension in his posture easing just a fraction. "Your resourcefulness continues to surprise me." "Yeah, well, desperation does that to a person," Camille replied, her gaze flicking to the flickering lights overhead. "Now let's see how long we can keep spinning this yarn before they catch on." The reprieve gave them a precious window of time, and Camille knew they needed to use it wisely. Their odds of survival were still abysmal, but at least they weren't zero. Yet. "We need to use this time to figure out how to take out those frigates," Camille said, her mind racing through possibilities. Ryden nodded. "We could try to overload their systems with a feedback loop, maybe cause a power surge." "Think you can pull that off?" Camille asked. "Honestly, no idea," Ryden admitted. "But hey, if we go down, at least we'll go down knowing we were a massive pain in their scaly asses." The station trembled again, Another reminder that while they'd gained a temporary advantage, the clock was still ticking. Camille took a deep breath, focusing on the task at hand. They had to act fast before the Zaltraxians untangled the myths and resumed their assault with renewed vigor. As Raiden began working on the overload plan, Camille turned her attention to their defenses. They needed to fortify their position, make every resource count. "Let's see if we can reinforce the station's shields," Camille suggested, pulling up the station's schematics on her handheld console. "Divert power from non-essential systems. If we have to shut down the coffee machines, I'm blaming you," Raiden said, his tone light despite the seriousness of the situation. "Deal," Camille replied, her fingers flying over the console as she rerouted power. "Besides, if we survive this, we'll need all the caffeine we can get." The station's shields flickered, then glowed with renewed intensity. It wasn't much, but it was something. Camille knew they were still outmatched, but at least they'd put up a fight before going down. As the minutes passed, the tension in the control room was palpable. They were a small team, facing overwhelming odds, and yet they were still fighting, still hoping for a miracle. "Feedback loops ready," Raiden announced, his voice a mix of weariness and determination. "Just give the word and we'll see if we can fry their circuits." Camille nodded, steeling herself for whatever came next. "Do it." Raiden initiated the sequence, and for a moment everything seemed to hold its breath. The station's systems hummed with energy, the air thrumming with anticipation. Then the lights flickered, and Camille felt a surge of panic. Had they pushed too hard? Was the station about to collapse under its own strain? But instead of imploding, the station's systems held steady, and Camille realized with relief that the feedback loop was working. The Zaltraxian frigates were caught off guard, their systems overloaded with the surge of energy. Camille allowed herself a moment of triumph. They'd done it, they'd bought themselves more time. "Looks like they're scrambling," Raiden said, a grin spreading across his face. "We might have just thrown a wrench in their plans." Tyrell nodded, his expression one of cautious optimism. "It's a start, but we must remain vigilant." They won't give up easily. Camille knew he was right. The battle was far from over, but they'd given themselves a fighting chance. And sometimes that was all you could ask for. As they regrouped, Camille couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with her team. They were an odd bunch, thrown together by circumstances beyond their control, but they were united in their determination to survive. "Looks like it's time for Plan C," Camille said, a wry smile on her lips. Raiden raised an eyebrow. "We have a Plan C." "Not yet," Camille admitted. "But give us 5 minutes and I'm sure we'll think of something." They shared a laugh, the sound a brief reprieve from the seriousness of their situation. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind them that they were still alive, still fighting. As they strategized, Camille couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. They were battling rebels inspired by twisted Earth myths, surviving on coffee and sheer stubbornness. It was a tale that would probably make for a great story if they lived to tell it. And as the alarms continued to blare, the station shuddering under the assault, Camille felt a flicker of hope. They might be outmatched and isolated, but they were still in the game. And if the Zaltraxians thought they'd roll over and play dead, well, they had another thing coming. "Let's show them what human ingenuity can do," Camille said, her voice filled with determination. Raiden grinned, his eyes alight with defiance. "Let's give them a myth worth remembering." As they faced the next wave of attacks, Camille knew that whatever happened, they'd go down fighting. And for now, that was enough. Camille stood with her back against the cold metal of the command center, eyes fixed on the flickering console displays. To think their lives now depended on whether an alien rebellion could be sidetracked by a few cleverly planted myths. It was almost poetic in a "we're all going to die anyway" kind of way. "Okay," she said, cracking her knuckles. "Time to throw another log on this cosmic dumpster fire." Raiden, still riding the high of their temporary win, looked over with a grin. "You mean we haven't already burned this thing to the ground?" "Not quite," Camille replied. "Turns out we're not the total losers the universe thinks we are." Tyrell, who had been hovering near the back like someone at a party who'd lost their drink, finally stepped forward. I think I may be able to help, he said, his voice a quiet counterpoint to their banter. Camille raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, planning to join our merry band of Mythbusters, Tyrell, he nodded, his eyes focused and serious. I know people, he said, with a tone that suggested those people might not want to be known. Some of them aren't entirely convinced that our dear leaders haven't been twisting tails for their own ends. So, you're saying there might be some Zaltraxians who aren't swallowing the cosmic Kool-Aid, Raiden remarked, tapping a rhythm on his console. Exactly, Tyrell replied. If we can reach them, show them what's really happening, it could turn the tide. Camille exchanged a look with Raiden. Well, it's more promising than hoping our shields hold, which is like betting on a three-legged horse in the intergalactic derby. Raiden gave a mock salute. Technology's been less than reliable for us so far. Maybe it's time to work on some good old-fashioned alien diplomacy. Camille turned to Tyrell, who looked simultaneously like he had a plan and was hoping it wouldn't involve too much actual work. Think you can get us an audience with your skeptical friends? Tyrell hesitated, then nodded. I'll see what I can do. They're on one of the frigates, probably trying to make sense of the chaos we've thrown them into. Camille couldn't help but chuckle. Good. Let's add a little more confusion to the mix. Raiden was already hacking away, fingers flying over his console as if trying to set a personal speed record for typing. The console beeped in response, a hopeful sign that they might just pull this off before the universe decided to play its final card. Got it, Raiden announced, swiveling around. I've pinged their communication node. Now we wait and hope they're more reasonable than, well, us. Yeah, because we're the poster children for reason, Camille snorted. But let's give it a whirl. Tyrell moved to the comm station, looking like someone about to make a call to an ex they'd rather forget. I'll handle this. They might be more willing to listen to one of their own. Just remember, Camille said, make it sound like we're offering them more than a front row seat to our obliteration. The comms crackled to life, a voice filtering through the static. Who's trying to reach us during battle? You better have a bloody good reason. Tyrell straightened. It's me, Tyrell. I'm aboard the Anthropo station. There was a pause, then a different voice, sharper, more calculated. What are you doing over there, Tyrell? You decided to switch sides. Tyrell cast a sideways glance at Camille, who waved him on. I'm still with you, but I think we've been duped. The myths, they're being manipulated. We need to talk. Another pause. Camille could almost hear the mental gears grinding on the other end. All right, speak. Camille leaned forward, sensing a crack in their enemy's armor. Tell them about Earth, she whispered. Tyrell nodded. The Earth myths you're following, there's more to them than rebellion. They are stories of unity, resilience. We've been trying to show you how they've been twisted. Raiden cut in, unable to resist. Yeah, we're very patriotic about our ancient bedtime stories. The line was silent. Camille held her breath, wondering if they'd overplayed their hand. Then the voice returned, wary but interested. What do you propose? Camille took the lead again. Let's show you what the myths really mean. Let's work together to expose the truth. And if you're lying, then you can enjoy the satisfaction of watching us get blown to bits, Camille replied. But if we're right, maybe we stand a chance of ending this madness. Silence stretched out, the kind of silence that could either herald salvation or damnation. Camille's heart thumped like a malfunctioning maintenance droid. Then finally, the voice spoke. All right, Tyrell. You have our attention. We'll meet under a truce. If you can prove what you say, it'll be worth it, Tyrell promised, his voice steady with conviction. As the connection cut, Camille let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Okay, we've got a toehold. Now we just need to scale the rest of this cliff without breaking our necks. Raiden gave her a thumbs up. No biggie. We've only got a fragile alliance hanging on a thread of interstellar myths. All the more reason to get moving, Camille said. We need to compile everything we've got, show them how their leaders have bent the myths to serve their agenda. And we've got to do it before they decide we're too much trouble and go back to Plan A. Annihilate the pesky humans. Raiden added. They spent the next few hours assembling data, evidence, and snippets of Earth mythology that had been corrupted to fuel the Zaltraxian rebellion. Tyral was a bundle of nerves, but his determination shone through. He was their liaison, their link between two worlds that seemed hell-bent on mutual destruction. "Nice to know we're not the only ones with dysfunctional leadership," Camille quipped as she loaded another batch of files onto a portable drive. "Humanity, setting examples in chaos management since forever," Raiden retorted, tossing her a bottle of water. Before long, Tyral received a message on his personal device, coordinates for a rendezvous with the dissenting Zaltraxian faction aboard one of their ships. Camille and Raiden exchanged a brief, hopeful glance. This was it, a chance to turn the tide without ending in a spectacular explosion. "Are we really doing this?" Raiden asked, his tone incredulous. "Trusting a bunch of aliens who've been trying to blow us out of the sky," Camille shrugged. "Got any better ideas? They seem to be in short supply." "Point taken," Raiden said, pocketing his console. "Let's hope they're more into compromise than vaporization." With their evidence in hand, they headed to the docking bay. The ship designated for their meeting was Zaltraxian, sleek and ominous, but it was their lifeline out of this mess. Camille looked at her team, the ragtag bunch of humans and one surprisingly cooperative Zaltraxian defector. If they survived this, they might just have a tale that even the most skeptical barflies wouldn't believe. "Ready?" she asked, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "As ready as a turkey on the day before Thanksgiving," Raiden replied, making Camille snort despite herself. "Let's go make some new friends," Tyral said, stepping up to the ship's entry. "And hope they're not too trigger-happy." As they boarded the alien vessel, Camille couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into an entirely new chapter, one that could lead to either peace or catastrophe. Then again, the line between the two was blurrier than her vision after a night of heavy drinking. Inside, the air was tense, the Daker as alien as the beings they were about to meet. Camille took a deep breath, adjusting her grip on the portable drive. This was it, their chance to shift the balance, to prove that humanity wasn't just a footnote in the Zaltraxian rebellion. The meeting chamber was stark, functional, not unlike the conference rooms back on Anthropo Station, minus the motivational posters and the smell of stale coffee. A group of Zaltraxians awaited them, their expressions inscrutable as they sized up their unexpected visitors. Camille nodded at Tyral, who stepped forward to initiate the interstellar equivalent of small talk, which wasn't much different from the human version, awkward, stilted, and full of potential for disaster. "We appreciate the chance to meet," Tyral began, then gestured to Camille. "This is Dr. Camille Voss. She's one of the humans trying to share the truth behind the myths. One of the Zaltraxians, a tall figure with a gaze sharp enough to cut through steel, leaned forward. "We've heard your claims. Now convince us." Camille shared a quick glance with Raiden before stepping up to the makeshift presentation area. "All right, here goes nothing," she muttered under her breath. She started with the basics, the origins of the myths, their transformations, and how they'd been tailored to incite rebellion. With each point, she could sense the Zaltraxian skepticism eroding, replaced by the flicker of doubt. "Our stories weren't meant to inspire violence," Camille said, wrapping up her presentation with a sense of urgency. "They were about survival, unity, standing together in the face of impossible odds." "Sounds like us," one of the Zaltraxians murmured, earning a nod of agreement from his peers. Raiden chimed in, ever the opportunist. "Maybe we're not so different after all, except for the scales and the whole trying to kill us thing." Camille shot him a look but couldn't hold back a smile. "Our point is, we're stronger when we work together. The enemy isn't each other, it's the lies we've been fed." The room went silent, the Zaltraxian leaders exchanging glances. For a moment, Camille feared they'd dismiss her words as just another human fairytale. But then the lead Zaltraxian spoke, their voice carrying a weight that suggested they weren't in the habit of second chances. "We'll consider your proposal." If what you say is true, then perhaps there is a path forward, one that doesn't end in mutual destruction. Camille let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, the relief a palpable force that swept through her. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start, a chance to transform their desperate gamble into something more. "Thank you," she said, the words heavy with gratitude and the promise of possibility. "We'll do everything we can to prove it." As they made their way back to the shuttle, Ryden nudged her with an elbow. "Think they bought it?" Camille chuckled, the sound tinged with disbelief. "Who knows? But at least we've started a conversation, and that's more than we had yesterday." Tyrrell joined them, his expression one of cautious optimism. "I think we'll pull through," he said. Together, Camille nodded, feeling a spark of hope take root inside her. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and the specter of failure, but they'd taken the first step toward something better. And sometimes, in the grand theater of interstellar politics, that was all you needed to change the script. Camille Voss stood in the cramped confines of the Zaltraxian shuttle, feeling like a sardine in a tin can, which was probably an improvement considering their usual prospects of becoming stardust. The shuttle vibrated with the mechanical hum of engines that sounded like they were held together by duct tape and good intentions. She glanced at Ryden, who, despite the tension, was fiddling with his console like a teenager who'd just discovered social media. "Think this bucket of bolts can make it to the court without falling apart?" Ryden quipped, eyebrow arched. "We've made it this far without exploding, so I'd say we're on a roll," Camille replied, her tone as dry as a Martian desert. Tyrrell, their resident Zaltraxian ally, was a mix of nerves and determination. He sat across from them, leafing through the digital files with the kind of intensity usually reserved for last-minute exam cramming. The High Court isn't known for their hospitality towards humans, or dissenters for that matter. Perfect. "I love unwelcome surprises," Ryden said with a wry smile. "Makes life so much more thrilling." "Just focus on the mission," Camille interjected, her eyes fixed on the flickering display. "We prove their leaders twisted the myths, and maybe, just maybe, we avoid becoming cosmic roadkill." The shuttle jolted as it docked with a resounding clunk, an ominous echo that suggested the docking clamps had seen better days. The hatch hissed open, revealing the grand expanse of the interstellar court. It was as opulent as it was intimidating, filled with beings from across the galaxy, each looking like they'd rather be anywhere else but here. Camille took a deep breath and stepped forward, the weight of their evidence tucked under her arm in a portable drive. As they entered the courtroom, the buzz of conversation dwindled, replaced by the silent judgment of 100 prying eyes. "Welcome, Doctor." Voss to the Zaltraxian High Court, a voice boomed, as grandiose as the setting. The speaker was an elderly Zaltraxian, whose scales shimmered in the spectral lights. "We understand you have evidence to present." "Yes, and I promise it'll be more entertaining than your usual proceedings," Camille replied, earning a few raised brows and a smirk from Ryden. The court was arranged in tiers, with the judges perched high above like vultures atop a particularly fascinating carcass. Camille approached the central podium, where a holographic display awaited, ready to project their findings. "No pressure, but everything rides on this," Ryden whispered as he took his place beside Camille. "You know, just in case you were feeling too comfortable." "Thanks for the pep talk," Camille shot back, her fingers dancing over the controls to initiate the presentation. The lights dimmed, and the holographic display sprang to life, casting an eerie glow that highlighted the skepticism etched on the judges' faces. Camille began to lay out the case, each piece of evidence a step in a precarious dance that needed to end in their favor. "Ladies, gentlemen, and otherwise," Camille began, drawing a few chuckles, "we're here to discuss how Earth myths were manipulated for rebellion. What you've dealt with isn't the truth. It's a poorly written fan fiction, and we all know those are the worst." A murmur rippled through the court, interest piqued. Camille delved into the myths, her words punctuated by the holographic images that danced above them. She highlighted the alterations, the interpretations twisted to serve a rebellious agenda rather than their intended lessons of unity. These myths were tales of resilience, not rage, Camille continued, each word measured, each pause intentional. They spoke of finding strength in each other, not tearing societies apart. Tyrrell added his voice to the fray, explaining his people's plight, the manipulation that had driven them to the brink. "We are victims of deception," he declared, his voice steady, resonating with the truth. "It's time for clarity, not conflict." Camille watched the judges closely as they absorbed the information, their expressions unreadable yet hinting at the internal debate. The room was silent, the kind of silence that could precede either enlightenment or execution, not that she was eager for the latter. "And what proof do you have that our leaders propagated these falsehoods?" one judge demanded, their tone as jagged as broken glass. "Glad you asked," Ryden chimed in, stepping up to the display. "We intercepted encrypted communications, traced them back to certain key figures." A little light reading on their extracurricular activities, if you will. A series of documents flashed into view, detailed logs of communications that painted an unflattering picture of deceit and manipulation. The court was abuzz with hushed conversations, the weight of their revelation settling in like a dark cloud. Camille seized the moment, her voice rising to cut through the din. "This isn't just about Earth or Zaltrax. It's about facing the truth no matter how ugly. If we can't do that, then we've already lost more than a fight. We've lost our integrity." A heavy pause followed, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a plasma blade. The lead judge leaned forward, their scaled hands clasped in deliberation. "Your evidence is compelling, Dr. Voss, but truth alone is not enough. We require action, resolution." Camille nodded, the gears in her mind spinning faster than a malfunctioning centrifuge. "We propose collaboration, a joint effort to rectify these misunderstandings, to rewrite the narratives with truth as the guiding star, rewrite the myths." Another judge scoffed, their skepticism palpable. "What makes you think we'd agree to that?" "Because," Camille said, her voice steady, "it's not just about rewriting myths. It's about rewriting our future. Together." The judges conferred in hushed tones, their discussion a murmur of uncertain deliberation. Camille's heart raced, the outcome hanging in the balance like a sword over their necks. Finally, the lead judge spoke, their voice a mix of caution and reluctant hope. "We will consider your proposal. If we find your intentions genuine, we may proceed with a new course of action." Camille exhaled, relief washing over her like a cool breeze. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they'd managed to plant a seed of change, a chance to steer the course away from mutual annihilation. "Thank you," Camille said with genuine gratitude, stepping back from the podium. "We'll do everything in our power to prove the integrity of our intentions." As they exited the court, Ryden let out a breath he'd apparently been holding for the past hour. "Holy hell, did that actually work?" "Looks like it," Camille replied, the corners of her mouth lifting in a cautious smile. "Let's hope they are as eager for change as they seem." Tyrrell joined them, his expression a tapestry of relief and cautious optimism. "We've taken a significant step today. Whether it leads to salvation or further strife is yet to be seen." Camille nodded, her gaze distant as she considered the weight of their actions. The myths they'd shared were more than just stories. They were bridges, pathways to understanding that extended beyond the realm of fiction. As they made their way back to the shuttle, Camille felt a flicker of hope. They'd confronted the demons of deception with the light of truth, and in doing so had begun to forge a path to salvation. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was something, a chance to rise above the chaos and find common ground in the rubble. And sometimes, in the vast, uncaring expanse of the universe, that was all you needed to tip the scales in your favor. The buzzing of the interstellar court was still ringing in Camille's ears as they shuffled back to the Zaltraxian shuttle. The place had all the charm of a bureaucratic hellscape, but at least they weren't leaving in shackles, or worse, a fine mist of atoms. As the shuttle door clanged shut, Camille allowed herself a rare moment of triumph. They'd done it. Well, maybe not done in the sense of a neat and tidy ending, but they'd at least managed to not muck things up completely. The engines whined to life again, carrying a sound like 1,000 cats being slowly dragged across a chalkboard. "Home sweet sardine can," Ryden muttered, strapping himself in with the enthusiasm of a man ready for instant death or instant noodles, whichever came first. "Shut it, Ryden. You know you love this rust bucket," Camille shot back, trying to adjust her seatbelt that was apparently designed for someone with 2 ribs. Tyrrell, sitting across from them, was visibly more relaxed than he'd been going in. "We've avoided immediate execution." "I'd call that a win," he said, a rare grin slipping across his rigid features. "True," Ryden replied. "I mean, it's not like we were standing on a knife's edge or anything. Just a regular day at the office, right?" "Right," Camille agreed, though her voice carried the weariness of 1,000 such regular days. "But we aren't out of this yet." The court may have nodded politely, but it's the follow-through that matters. "We've got to make sure this collaboration doesn't turn into another cosmic joke." The journey back to Anthropo Station was as uneventful as space travel ever is. A series of small, slightly terrifying events punctuated by boredom. Ryden spent most of the trip poking at his console, as if the universe's secrets were just a swipe away. Camille stared out into the void, mulling over the tangled web of myths and realities they dived into. "So, humans are officially mythological creatures now," Ryden quipped, half to himself. "Wonder if I can get a job as a demigod." "Sure, right after your stint as an intergalactic diplomat," Camille shot back, though she couldn't help but smile. The idea of their earthly tales having such a profound impact was both exhilarating and terrifying. Myths had power, and they'd wielded it like a double-edged sword. Anthropo Station loomed into view, a sprawl of metal and blinking lights that felt more like home than any place on Earth. The alarms, predictably, greeted them with their usual fanfare. The universal language for something's broken, but we'll worry about it after lunch. "Ah, music to my ears," Ryden said, stepping off the shuttle with an ironic flourish. "You don't even know what's broken yet," Camille replied, shaking her head as the station doors slid open, the cold metal corridors stretching out like familiar arms. Inside, Gregor awaited them, his expression hovering somewhere between relief and his usual sardonic disapproval. "Look who's back from playing hero in the stars. Thought you'd gotten yourself vaporized." "Not yet," Camille replied, raising the portable drive as if it were a trophy. "But we might have saved our collective hides with this." "Nice. Hope it was worth the trouble," Gregor said, scratching his chin. "The Zaltraxians are laying off the alarms for the moment. Maybe they're tuning into their own myths now. Beats listening to you lot," Camille smirked. "Yeah, they might start worshipping Earth's greatest mythological invention next. Breakfast. If they do, I'm starting a galactic pancake chain," Ryden added, a gleam of mischief in his eye. With the court behind them, Camille and her team returned to the station's command center, where the usual flickering displays greeted them like old friends with a drinking problem. Dr. Farnsworth was there, fiddling with a mess of tangled wires and looking as charismatic as a wet blanket. "Ah, the hero's return," he said in his usual monotone, "just in time for another malfunction, I see. Wouldn't miss it for the world," Camille quipped, setting the portable drive down on the central console. "Did you manage to convince them?" Farnsworth asked, though his tone suggested he'd already given up on miracles. "We managed a foot in the door," Camille replied. "Now we've got to make sure it doesn't slam shut on our heads. Tyrrell's people are open to rewriting the myths, with our help," Ryden added, the console's glow painting his face in blues and greens. "Gives us time to work out how not to blow the whole thing up." Farnsworth nodded, though his eyes betrayed a hint of skepticism. "Well, if anyone can turn stories into salvation, it's this lot. Just don't start believing your own press." Camille shrugged. "That would require someone actually writing about us. The station settled into a routine that was anything but routine as the fallout from their interstellar drama continued to unfold. Zaltraxian communications were less hostile, at least. The myths were slowly being untangled from the web of rebellion, beings across the galaxy beginning to see them for what they were, less a call to arms, more a call to something more noble. Camille found herself spending hours sifting through Earth's vast tapestry of tales, a task that was both exhilarating and exhausting. There was something profoundly moving about seeing their stories resonate with beings light years away, like echoes of shared humanity bouncing across the cosmos. Raiden was a constant presence at her side, his snarky comments punctuating the research with much-needed levity. "So, when do we get to the part where we're showered with intergalactic awards and free drinks for life?" he asked one day, eyes fixed on the endless scroll of data. "About the same time pigs learned to fly without jetpacks," Camille replied, not looking up from her screen. "Too bad. I was hoping to skip out on dinner bills for a while." Chiral, on the other hand, was navigating the delicate process of re-educating his people. It was a monumental task, a cultural shift so profound it made the tectonic plates of Earth look like child's play. Yet he handled it with a grace and determination that belied his usually nervous demeanor. "It's strange," he said to Camille one day, over a shared meal of unidentifiable but surprisingly edible station fare. "I never thought our salvation would come from stories. Never underestimate the power of a good story," Camille replied, stabbing at a piece of something. "They've been saving humans from madness and boredom for millennia." Chiral nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Perhaps we have more in common than we thought." As the days turned to weeks, the tension on the station eased, the constant alarms fading into the background like a bad habit finally kicked. The Zaltraxians were still a presence, but no longer the threat they'd been. Instead, they were partners, tentative perhaps, but partners nonetheless. The research base became a focal point, a bridge between worlds that seemed less distant every day. Camille found herself at the heart of it all, her work no longer just a curiosity but a necessity. The myths, once twisted into tools of rebellion, were now being set right, used to heal rather than harm. Dr. Farnsworth, in a rare moment of something resembling warmth, even acknowledged the shift. "Seems the station's earned its keep this time," he said, arms folded but a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Always nice to be more than a glorified alarm clock," Camille replied, her tone light but her expression serious. "Don't get too comfortable," he warned, though there was no real edge to his voice. "The galaxy's a big place. Plenty more myths out there to unravel, and plenty more breakfasts to ruin," Raiden added, appearing at her side like a shadow she couldn't shake. Camille laughed, a sound that felt strange and yet perfectly right. "Can't have everything, I suppose." The station, once a beleaguered outpost on the edge of chaos, had found a new purpose. It was a place of connection, of understanding, one small, flickering light in the vast, indifferent dark of space. And as Camille looked out from the command center, the galaxy spread before her in all its chaotic wonder, she couldn't help but feel a tiny spark of hope. They'd changed the narrative, if only a little. Proved that even in the bleakest corners of existence, there was room for something more. "Well," she said, turning back to her team, "guess we've got work to do." "Always, boss," Raiden agreed, his grin as irreverent as ever. And with that, they returned to the task at hand, ready to continue weaving myths into the fabric of the universe, one story at a time.